Good noon, friends. You've all read the biographical information about Mary Cappello on the flyers, correct? So I won't be going over that again. Instead, I've noticed that we Mormons like to ask the big questions, like, why are we here? That's my guiding question for us today. Why are we here? I suppose some of us are here seeking inspiration, either because we know and love Mary Cappello's work, or we know and love literature generally and trust in serendipity. Some are here because of a class, which we signed up for because we love literature. Others are here because someone recommended this reading, and perhaps some of us have shakier or even shadier motivations. But I want to tell you why I'm here, which is in part the story of why Mary Cappello is here. And I'll hope that this story will serve as inspiration or instruction, or at least preparation for those of you who've not yet discovered why you're here. A convenient starting point is almost exactly 8 years ago. Near the end of a course I was teaching on the history and theory of the essay. I had the bright idea to assign my students to scour 2006's literary journals in search of not just the best, but the most essayistic creative nonfiction for a list that we'd call the Essayist American Essays. And that's S-A-E-S-T, as in the superlative of essay. I think this was a valuable and exciting exercise for all involved, but wouldn't you know it, a pair of students missed the essential detail about 2006 and went back a few years earlier. And I'm normally a stickler for rules, and it pained me deeply to include an essay from 2004 on 2006's list until I read the essay they selected. It was called Awkwardness, an excerpt from Western Humanities Review, Volume 58, Number 2. What I found there kept me rapt with its joyful strangeness and deeply intelligent, meandering thinking. It seemed both wholly new and warmly familiar. It was an essay par excellence, both sui generis and fully participating in the tradition. My response to it was something like, "Where have you been all my life?" Under that essay's spell, I sought out more by this wonderful writer. I found her website and learned that a book's worth of awkwardness was due later that year. And as it happened that fall, I found the author herself at the University of Iowa's Nonfiction Now conference, where we hit it off beautifully, I think, and began a great friendship. I bought that book, Awkward, A Detour, then read it and reread it and taught it and loved it utterly. I also learned from her website that she was writing a book-length essay on mood. Now, this is 2007, I think. This seemed such a brilliant and odd idea that I couldn't wait to read it. Mary wrote 2 other brilliant books in the meantime, and I truly love them, but with all my heart, I've been waiting for the one on mood. So I have great news to report, with Mary's blessing. She's just recently signed a contract with the University of Chicago Press to publish Life Breaks In, a Mood Almanac, in fall 2016. So you can put that in your calendars. But don't just wait for that book. I encourage you to buy her other books today after the reading as well. And I think I have even better news for those of us gathered today. Mary will be reading from that forthcoming book as soon as I shut up and sit down. So why are we here? You know that Rilke poem, Archaic Torso of Apollo? Nobody's nodding. I'll read a little bit. Steve knows it. Yeah, Mary knows it. The one about the headless statue whose gaze emanates from everywhere. You remember how it ends? Otherwise, this stone would seem defaced beneath the translucent cascade of the shoulders and would not glisten like a wild beast's fur, would not from all the borders of itself burst like a star, for here there is no place that does not see you. You must change your life. So that's my hope, my expectation even for all of us here today. Mary Cappello's essays will change our lives. Please welcome her with me.
Well, it is so good to be here. And I want to thank Professor Patrick Madden, Professor Stephen Tuttle, and Melanie Henderson for their work in bringing me to your community today. I have enjoyed a meeting of the essaying mind and soul for a number of years, as Patrick Madden just mentioned, with him, and it's lovely to be here in real time, where he lives and works and thinks and imagines in your community. I want to thank the students for reading me and for writing your own inspired essays. I judged the contest for this year in nonfiction and essay, and it's just brilliant work. I also just had the supreme delight of having a conversation with about 20 students who are studying creative nonfiction and the essay, and I've told them I'm going to plagiarize them, and that's that. It was a really wonderful experience. I'm still very charged up from it. I want to thank Brigham Young University for your utmost generosity in bringing me out here from the East Coast. So the reading I've prepared for you today is drawn from a nearly completed book, Life Breaks In, a Mood Almanac, and this is a sort of debut reading. I've been working on this book for a number of years, but I've been caught up in other projects, and I've never read from it till now. So I want to say a few things to set up the reading, and then I'll just launch right in. I like to write about things that are fundamental to our being, but beyond our comprehension. Mood is like this. Philosophers, psychologists, and aesthetes seem to agree that mood is the primary conditioning possibility for pretty much everything we do, feel, and perceive. At the same time, guess what? No one really seems to know exactly what mood is. It is principally elusive. What better form than the ever mercurial essay to take mood on then? And I'm going to suggest that mood wants the essay, and that the essay inclines toward mood. Montaigne's essays were born of a mournful mood that yielded, as we know, hopefully we know, and if we don't know yet, you have something in store for you, if not yet read Montaigne, that yielded playful inventions. We know that Nietzsche read Montaigne to alter his own mood. Emerson, the great Ralph Waldo, is understood to be a philosopher of what? Of moods. And Roland Barthes, the great French essayist, his entire oeuvre is understood as an attempt to transmute his moods into theories. Now, the book that I've written is orchestrated around 4 segments. Elements, as in the weather, the atmosphere, the air. Rooms, as in those forms that contain us, voices and sounds, sonographs, and modes, how we do things. I'm reading today from the elements section. Why? Because, well, the elements and mood have much in common. Moods are said to lift. We ally them with spirits, vapors, genies, aromas, like clouds. I want to think clouds with moods rather than take conceptual aim. So you see, I'm not trying to point a dagger at my subject. I'm just trying to think with it. And in this segment in particular that I'm sharing today, I'm trying to imagine the aesthetic principles of the book itself, which might go by the name, what am I trying to do? Cloud writing, mood writing. Now, as a writer of new nonfiction forms, I'm interested in how the essay works on attention, how it absorbs us, makes possible altered states, sidles up to a reader and intimates. And often when I give a reading, I curate segments to give the people who are kind enough to listen pause and movement, silence. I didn't do that this day. Today, I'm going to ask you to enter into a kind of immersive absorptive plane, and I figure that folks trained by Patrick Madden will have what it takes to enter into a sustained indwelling, a contemplative space. So this piece just runs to its end with no pause. 1 or 2 other things I'll just want to say. I'm not the only one to have suggested that mood wants the essay. In a book called Atmosphere, Mood, Stimmung by Hans Ulrich Gumbrecht, and Stimmung is the German word for mood, and it's so much more indicative than than our own word in some ways. It has built into it attunement and the idea of voice and touch. In his book, he suggests that if we're going to write for Stimmung, we need to essay. We need to yield to mood. We need to gesture toward it in a form most suited to its obliqueness and immediacy, the essay. So what I've done in my book is to generate a series of what I call mood hints. These are just hints and hunches. And then I try to follow them. And so the work that I'm sharing today follows this mood hint. What's more difficult, finding a language for our moods or for the forms that clouds take? Impossible, perhaps, to make a literary form approximating clouds. Easier to rustle up atmospheres and call those moods. A world made of clouds isn't formless. There are ridges and peaks, incommensurate intertwinings, appositions, and breakings through. Even if there is not density, there is form. A mood is like this. It is a form without density. Of clouds and moods. Clouds might be described as cottony or like cotton balls, but such obvious metaphors were nothing compared to plucking a real cotton ball from a paper bag, holding it first in my fist as if to weigh it inside a palm suited to its size, no wider in circumference than a quarter, then applying it with small fingers, affixing it to a piece of construction paper so as to pronounce the idea of sky. We always evinced our makeshift skies this way in elementary school. In between counting and spelling, rambunctious recess, and reciting the Lord's Prayer, a quiet cove would open like the setting of a table, and we'd agree to concentrate on arts and crafts. By second grade, we had advanced from blowing bubbles to gluing cotton balls into place to form a scene, always with cloud-colored glue, the milk of Elmer's moo, and the paper just as porous absorbed the cloud and held it aloft. We had advanced from eating cotton candy or making houses out of sugar to using the white and springy earthy plant stuff to form a scene. Would you be a copyist? To craft what you knew was wanted, a cloud form here, tree to one side, flowers beneath. Would you be a realist or an imagist? I only knew this much. One kid used but one cotton ball per cloud, while others amassed them all on top each other, pursuing 3 dimensions, and still another introduced so fine a tune as to tear the ball, and thus to teach us all that not all clouds are round or billowy. No wonder my earliest memories of clouds isn't of clouds at all, but of a medium for imaging them and a tactile lolling. Cloud tales rely on a lexicon of elusiveness and capture. Clouds as entities that lure us with their indefinable definiteness. No sooner do they exert a pull, like slow-moving, variously shaped tugboats asking us to board, then they somersault into ungraspable dissolution. The relationship between clouds and moods is quite a complex one, both explicitly and implicitly. It's safe to say that clouds and psyches have gotten all mixed up. Clouds literally affect what we take to be our mood states, and they do this in both conventional ways, rain clouds equals sad mood, and singular ways, rain clouds equals, for you in particular, good moods. But clouds are also available forms to project our feelings onto. Oddly, by mapping our mental states onto clouds, we seem to admit an affiliation between ourselves and clouds. But we don't go deep enough, or we only go as far as our egos will allow. We fail to admit that, riffing mildly on Shakespeare, we are such stuff as clouds are made of, and our little lives are rounded with a sleep. Do outward cloudscapes map themselves onto our minds interpretively? Do we seek in outward atmospheric marks the affirmation or negation of our own inner vagary? Or is our affinity with clouds an effect of our being made of the same stuff? Pollen, air, dust, water, and bits of volcano. Weather emanates from an unseen region at the center of the earth. No. It emanates from bodily effluvia. No. It emanates from air in some place far distant from where we're standing, breathing. No, weather is itself immanence. Moods and clouds incite a similar epistemological struggle. We are flummoxed by where either emanates from, yet we understand them as reciprocal. who among us is not affected by the weather? Some will be claimed to be deeply, inordinately, and ever affected by it. Others to be aware of how deeply affected they are only when the weather changes and a new surfeit of feeling suddenly becomes available to them. Much of what humans have built is designed to protect us from the weather, literally to keep out the elements, as though our major modern mode is to defend ourselves from it, rather than invite and live with it. Hardly do we consider our ability to affect it, individually or collectively, see global warming. My cloud is my domain, my fantasy, my freedom, my snort of particles. Hey you, get off mine. A mood passes or lifts, as does a cloud. I can see clearly now the rain is gone. I can see all obstacles in my way. Now, I sung that because Professor Madden's children relied on me to sing even though I'm not able to, and I promised them I would sing that line. So I can see clearly now the rain is gone. I can see all obstacles in my way. Depressed, I'm under one. Elated, I'm on cloud 9. Either I'm feeling the need to cry and not able to, or it's the kind of day in which it wants to rain and can't. Our moods speed things up or slow things down. Spatio-temporal and temporo-spatial, like weather. Clouds and minds are made of buoyancy and heft. Perhaps based on the bad rap that clouds obtain, consider brain fog and head in the clouds, a cloudy thinking or airhead. A 21st century online congregation called the Cloud Appreciation Society has formed. Quote, we believe that clouds are unjustly maligned and that life would be immeasurably poorer without them, their manifesto begins. The group, apparently based in Great Britain, enjoys a worldwide membership of cloud lovers entitled to badges, and if they wish, t-shirts, as well as a cloud spotter app as guide to 40 species of clouds for identification. While one might be tempted to compare the group to bird watchers, the group's mission seems less about tracking clouds down or ticking off sightings while waiting quietly as a hunter without a gun, and more about giving people an opportunity to post photographs of breathtaking cloud formations from around the world. Clouds are, quote, nature's poetry. Contemplating them is therapeutic and can save on psychotherapy bills, according to Cloud Appreciation Society's manifesto. Though no one goes so far as to claim to see the face of Jesus in a Cinnabon-shaped cloud, a special segment of the site is reserved for photos of clouds that look like things, reminiscent of our tendency to take special pleasure in finding something akin to life on Earth in the sky, if not exactly attributing such sightings the power of a vision, a forecast, or an amulet. Pledging to fight what they call sun fascists and blue sky thinking, wherever they find it, the founders of the group offer in their manifesto an anthropomorphic mood projectile par excellence when they state, quote, we seek to remind people that clouds are expressions of the atmosphere's moods and can be read like those of a person's countenance. Clouds are people too, I guess. Such confusion pointing up our desire to tame the beyond our control mood modulation of clouds, the degrees to which clouds hold us, and the ways in which they perpetually beguile us. If I try to look at clouds, if I go looking for them, they can't affect me. Then they want verbs like perforate or punctuate, rather than arc and envelop and spread. Then they call for the stamp of aphorism. Clouds, the Rorschach of the gods. They ask me to find correspondences, the steam rising from the body of a well-worked horse, fish flopping in the mist, your cigarette's smoke rings. Then the day is flecked particle board as stiff as an attaché, the sky spongy as discarded orange rind surprising the sidewalk, not yet discovered by ants. Today I look out for collateral images. A cloud is the outline of Queen Anne's lace, having lost its intricate center. Let it thrive in the middle as well as at the side of the road. Clouds are notes hung from a sky staff. The sky is the dull underside of an inverted pie plate stained with burnt cherry, only at sunset, never sunrise. If I go looking, I can only feel this mood state. It was a day of exceptional promise. Skies most often take me off guard when I'm driving, rarely en route to work, usually when I'm coming home from the region called South County, Rhode Island, to the city of Providence. There are spring days on the back roads of a town called Slocum, when everything at a juncture is dipped in platinum. My heart slows then, and the car downshifts into a surreal gear. Then the thermometer fails to register, as if the sun has become for that instant a blob of mercury, and nothing is readable anymore. Something gets flipped for those moments, granting a temporary peek at reality's underside. We are not where we seem, nor does it matter where we're headed. On another day, I'm already on the highway, late February, early March, when what appears to be miles and miles of low-lying sheets of cloud announce a landslide in the skyscape, either that or the third coming. We whip out our iPhones in a ridiculous attempt to catch it rather than contemplate it. I take 10 pictures in 5 seconds. Luckily, I'm not in the driver's seat. Later, when we compare our shots to those of equally dumb witnesses on Facebook, I discover an accidental detail on the highway's other side. A white stretch limo speeds like an absurdist competitor beneath the looming avalanche of sky. We too sped in our lichen-colored Prius because I'm sure the effect of this cloud was to quicken our pace. Irrespective of any desire we might have had to be held by it, the highway seemed dead set on matching the breadth of its widening stripe, but being outlapped by the velocity of this form's vastly superior engine, had sloped irretrievably away from it until what seemed capable of overcoming us had vanished. I wondered what it would have meant to us if we'd been carless. It's not nearly nightfall, but after dinner, when you close down one part of the day, hopeful to open one more before sleep, but uncertain of how or if you'll find the energy. You're moving on, only to be drawn more deeply in, slowing distractedly down, when something unlikely about the quality of the light inside calls you to go outside and look. How could something in the far-off, nearly night sky have penetrated so as to alter the shadows cast by lamplight of the objects in our rooms? You follow it like the scent of cinnamon rising through fork holes of a just-baked pie, and find your neighbors out on the sidewalk too. It's so much better a group call than chasing fires or a siren, though truth be told, there's a fire in the sky this dusk. Pink and blue and pink, then white, shuttered sky. The street's speed limit sign is perfectly illuminated, 25 mph, but few cars cruise the road beneath the tulip-arched streetlight, easily mistaken for a moon. You expect to hear a crackling, but the electrical wires merely hang like lank cordons, or more deliberately, like cubist surveyor lines. It's the trees that encroach wildly on the sky, their sinister and ruthless side hidden by day. And where are you in this? Nothing you did made this happen, and you don't want to be together with these other people beneath this sky, and you don't want to be alone. You've just been called by the day to suppose the alteration of a mood, to watch the nearly night sky slowly fold and unfold before tucking away a rose-colored dish towel. To have such mood cloud experiences, or vice versa, is one thing. To make art from such encounters, quite another. We are the first generation to see clouds from both sides, Paul Bellows, narrator, remarked in his novel Henderson, the Rain King. First people dreamed upward, now they dream both upward and downward. This is bound to change something somewhere, quote. Henderson is a many times married millionaire who has this thought as he's purveying the clouds from the vantage point of an airplane on an ostensible pleasure trip. En route from the United States to Africa, he's accompanying friends who are traveling there on their honeymoon. A kind of lost soul who feels guilty about his wealth and insulated from the truth of things. He wanders in search of a purpose, trying to get in touch with the world. For example, getting really earthy, he tries pig farming, but that fails. Quote, I like the idea of clouds from both sides, and some other things from both sides, singer-songwriter Joni Mitchell says, after offering this précis of Bellows' character in her introduction to her 1967 performance of the song, composed after reading this passage in the novel. Mitchell sounds like a schoolchild or unassuming naif when in a quiet voice she says, I call my song Both Sides Now, then proceeds to perform a master folk work of the greatest beauty and profundity. Mitchell never finished reading the novel. She didn't need to. left up in the air, as she put it, she was inspired by the provocation of seeing clouds from both above and below, by a character much like us all, in search of, quote, what life was all about to him. The resulting song with its familiar refrain, I've looked at clouds from both sides now, and its humbling conclusion, I really don't know clouds at all, is as powerful in its harmonies and dissonances, in Mitchell's rendition at least, as it is roundabout in its ability to find its way into our hearts. Each stanza opens not with a pronouncement of I-centered feeling, but with a litany or collection of evocatively subjectless things, in the first instance, of shapes, of clouds. Bows and flows and angel hair, and ice cream castles in the air, and feather canyons everywhere. I've looked at clouds that way. Some songs run like a vein of ore in our blood, even if we don't realize how integral a part of our cloud makeup they are, until we hear them for the first time again after a period of many years. Then it's hard to know if the force of recollection makes the song feel suddenly essential, or if it really is part of a mood-shaping bedrock of our being. Both Sides Now is one of those pieces of popular music inextricable from its year of composition, 1967, defining of an era, and belonging to listeners who were alive at that time, a song one calls one's own and that of others, part of a collective mood. The curious thing is that, affected as I feel by the song, it wasn't its author, Joni Mitchell's performance, that I would have heard growing up, or grown up on. Judy Collins' cover of Both Sides Now familiarized it for American audiences, leaving me to worry that voice is arbitrary in how we come to incorporate a piece of music into ourselves. We don't know what we're missing, and we don't know what we have, which is not quite the same as not knowing what you got till it's gone, more like not knowing what you got because you didn't know what else there was to have. By 1968, Both Sides Now enjoyed at least a dozen different covers in addition to Judy Collins' hit single. Listening to Collins' version is like revisiting a first crush, or better, it calls up the mood of macrame. Though I don't know how old I was or in what circumstance when I first heard the song, I was only 8 years old in 1968. And even though Collins' version is polyester to Mitchell's leather, listening to Collins sing it again stirs me. I'm not sure if it's the force of will with which she sings the song that most moves me, or if there's something to feelings being buried in daisy-patterned wallpaper with matching kitchen cupboard contact paper, because that's what the clavichord accompaniment reminds me of. The way her voice cracks on "at all" in the line, I don't know clouds at all, and later is held on those same words beyond what the song's tempo will allow. Maybe this is what fills me with a sense of this cloud-themed song being about the ineffable something that's always held back in us, in me. Suitable to both a rainy day pub or a daisy-filled meadow, pathetic as it sounds. The song features me stuck inside our family's powder blue Ford Falcon while harboring a yen for a wet red balloon-colored Mustang convertible. From Bing Crosby, Robert Goulet, and Frank Sinatra, across the ocean to Marie Laforêt, and across the universe to Leonard Nimoy, R.I.P. All manner of crooners chose Mitchell's song as their vehicle. The problem, though, may have been that they treated the song as a form of mood music, rather than a song about the inscrutability of life, whether viewed from above or below. The song seems to want an alternative to illusion and disillusion as epistemological options. Only a knowing being can admit that it does not know. In a YouTube video, Bing Crosby refuses to be a knowing being. He resembles a big-eared cartoon character. He sings the first few verses with his arms folded. He does something funny with his mouth, flicking its corners as though groping for an absent cigarette. He tries and fails to achieve a Sinatra-esque understatement. Sinatra's rendition, meanwhile, might be characteristically swank, but he rushes through the song and jabs at the words like he's sparring with a silent partner, maybe Crosby? By the time he riffs on the last line, he riffs on it, interjecting the abbreviated "don't know it" between the eloquent "I really don't know life at all." We're embarrassed by what feels like some form of oleaginous illiteracy. For Goulet, accompanied by marimbas, maracas, and tambourines, The song is all larynx. You can't sing a folk song as though you really wished you were singing an aria from Il Trovatore. This Adam's apple version may have worked to make the song popular as a form of bachelor pad muzak, or for housewives lost in the swirl of an alone-time afternoon drink with the shades drawn and the air conditioner set too high. La Forêt has French in her favor. All those age sounds, produced by a voice that's breathy, whispering, and deep, makes me feel she's at least trying to give an account of the song's mood. Until the point of the second refrain, her voice suddenly morphs into a plaintive saxophone screech, as though the song had put her to sleep, and she were trying to ignite her own stupor. Nimoy's version, can you believe it, is at first accompanied by an instrument that sounds like finger cymbals, and later an electric piano, busy with the sound of an unrelated computational analysis, a coy reminder of Spock. Straining to hit the song's high notes, Nimoy is forced at one point to speak the lines. How many times will you listen to a song before deciding you've had enough of it? And if it makes you weep, does it only do that when you're in a particular mood? In Joni Mitchell's song, clouds are metonyms for that other great mystery of mysteries, not moods, but love, and by the end of the song, life itself. The lyrics say, I used to see clouds in a dreamy way, as emblems of possibility. Then I saw them as obstacles. They block the sun, they rain and snow. They're the reason I was stopped from doing things. Having seen them in these obverse ways, I still don't see them clearly or understand them any differently. I still fail to see them for what they are. The sentiment at the heart of the song isn't what makes me cry every time I hear it. And I think I could listen to the song endlessly, even in its bubblegum versions, for the way they at least confirm the song's compulsive interest. There are three particular lines that always sent my eyes to streaming: moons and Junes and Ferris wheels, the dizzy dancing way you feel, and to say I love you right out loud. I'm with a friend, and we're trying to tease out the difference between Joni's and Judy's versions. It's a canyon-feathered cloud of a day of recurring deliciousness, which is one of my friend's favorite words. It's summertime, and we're breaking from a vacation day of bike ride followed by swim to make huevos rancheros with fresh eggs and lime, sweet onions and goat cheese feta, dashes of hot sauce, and midday white wine. It's a most splendid of day sorts of day, of reading quietly together and embracing. My friend is a perpetual hugger, one of whose favorite utterances is, yay. She's the sort who smiles with her whole body and whose insistent delight fills the room. In spite of this, I'm aware in me of a muted darkness, a vacancy that wants to turn nimbus, cut off, suppressed. For the whole course of our conversation, in my line of vision, a pink flamingo in the nearby woods, a souvenir of another Maine transplanted, originally Floridian friend who disbanded her collection of Maine-staked pink flamingos, one to each of us before she died last winter. The friend who is my afternoon companion is her partner. We compare the versions. Joni's guitar isn't simple accompaniment. This is a major difference. She lets the guitar sing in parts and waits for it to finish before following up with her voice. Joni's range, even inside a single word like lost, is as warm as it is piercing, dense as fabric, transparent as glass. The song and her handling of it is made of carefully graded steeps, moment to moment shifts of octave, of clouds as seen from above or below, her singing, a lonesome calling across a cavernous sky like a yodel. Still, it's Judy's, the popularized version, that moves us both. I'm crying, my friend is weeping. The dizzy, dancing way you feel at a carnival. It must have a nostalgic pull for me, evoking a way I think I once felt. It's so recognizable, but a mood one can never know again. It's by definition attached to youth in 1968. As for saying I love you right out loud, I must be moved by the blunt blatancy of it, the speaking truth and welcoming consequences feel. Then there's a global feeling that could account for both our tears, the way that a mood evocative song like this confirms existence. Decades ago, you were where it was when it entered your airwaves. It reminds you of your having been. Now you are here, but someone else is gone who had been with you then, just as you will someday disappear. Can a song retain within its reverberating strings and chords a trace of all its listeners? Both Sides Now moves us as a remnant of our own existence. That existence needs conformation is enough to make a person cry. But it met a local grief for us that day as well. We were saved by its cloud occasion in this to share what we could neither adequately say nor feel. Each day is differently clouded, incrementally mooded, with no 2 days, clouds or moods alike. It must take a perpetual sleight of hand to insist, as we all do, that days and moods repeat themselves as one vast, unvariegated cloud form end to end. Constable lent us the verb skying for his practice of regularly, systematically studying the skies and the forms that floated therein, clouds, in his words, non-captive balloons. Presumably, he was provoked to undertake a more thoroughly scientific observation of the skies by critics of his art who found his clouds to be unbelievable, too weighty, prominent, or labored in their execution. Study doesn't have to yield exactitude, however, and the aim of Constable's cloud art needn't be confused with accuracy. What's most memorable to me about the cloud studies of Constable that I've seen is their size, the incalculable vastness of a cloudscape carried over into a 6 by 10 inch canvas. A cloud is something you can carry around in your compact, a small mirror reflecting one part of your face. What Constable arrives at in his meteorological study of clouds isn't an impossible truth, but an intimacy. It's a specificity that exceeds classification. It's a personal largesse of micro scatterings, the scraps and bits of paper on which he made his observations on clouds and skies, never formed into a lecture as he intended it before he died, but transmuted into brushes of strokes of color and lines. Fuseli and others have found a persistent mood in Constable's work, quote, the feeling of the threat of oncoming rain. Fuseli said the landscapes of Constable, quote, made him want to call for his overcoat and umbrella. Among Constable's favorite weather stories, though, according to Ron Broglio, was the glimmering landscape just after a rainfall. One of the things that makes clouds and moods so hard to illustrate, study, or pursue is that they are ever-changing, which might be why we like to project physiognomies into our skies, to imagine the sky itself as guard or guide, more rigidly a face and steadfast. To conclude that if the sky is above us, it must be looking down on us, and if it's looking down on us, it's watching over us, helping us to know what to expect. The last time I saw the man in the moon, I was living in Buffalo, that place where the only thing that's predictable about the weather is that it will change dramatically several times in the course of a day. It was there that I learned about snow squalls, lake effects, and wind tunnels, of the difference between snowy sidewalks and drifting tundra, of icicles and ice cycles, of the imprint of feet into absolute quiet and the disappearance of a limb into a bank, of sheets of translucency and gray-bright days, of beating glare and sun-washed showers, of the bliss of interiority and the necessity of inward dwelling. I was in my mid-20s in graduate school when I remember suddenly recognizing the genderless and kindly face, neither bald nor in need of hair, more serenely above it all even than the Buddhas, what everyone had referred to as the man in the moon. As a child, I think I had pretended to see it, and it's still not clear to me if its visage is only available in moments of absolute innocence, or in moments when the table set by experience is wiped clean by what one is coming to know, how one is coming to learn. You might say atmospheric conditions have to be just right for the moon to show its face as such, but I'm not so sure about this. I only saw it then, one night in Buffalo, in the same era in which I grew into a habit that I've never revisited since, of spending at least 2 hours every evening, longer on weekends, lying on my back and staring at the blank ceiling, thinking before getting out of bed. Those were precarious days for me of ambient anxiety, of feeling determined, scared, in love with both ideas and persons. I wouldn't say my bed-bound mornings were commensurate mornings, M-O-U-R-N-I-G-S. I don't think I was depressed. It was rather as though I were testing the pliancy of a hammock of solitude. I do believe studying the persistence of blank ceilings helped for me, the skies, to open up. Seeing the man in the moon filled in the patchiness of my own face. It filled me in with a feeling of, now I get it, alongside a cockeyed whirligig of a feeling. Now the moon was eye holes punched into the silk siding of a circus tent, awaiting the assumption of your gaze. Of course, conditions inside and outside need to be right to make us want to look upward rather than forever forward into our days, routines. What is that day on which the space between earth and sky is eclipsed, abridged? What gives us the feeling that skies move while earth stands still? Sheets of rain today are replaced by sheets of sun. The storm is not yet over. During the same period of my life of starting days by staring ceilingward, I discovered the paintings of Western New York artists, the electrified, vibrating patterns, the sky and landscapes of Charles E. Birchfield, 1893 to 1967. While my discovery of Birchfield in the 80s felt accidental, today I re-encounter him by way of a wall calendar, encouraging the contemplation of one painting for each of the 12 months of the year, assembled by the fairly new Birchfield Penny Art Center in Buffalo. His personal symbols, quote, and abstract conventions formed by sinuous lines and geometric patterns evoke sound, season, movement, and mood, end quote, the calendar's compositor explains. The watercolor painting I've described above is titled Clearing Sky and was painted in 1917. It is used to illustrate February in its calendar context, but to me, it looks much more like March. For March, they give us one of Birchfield's wallpaper designs titled Red Birds and Beech Trees, 1924. While the ground is interrupted by a startling pink from time to time, harbinger of spring, the mood of the work to my mind is Poe-esque fall, or maybe March in Buffalo. The sky is lavender brown. Its clouds are eggshell, thickly outlined in blue. Red bird-shaped blots fill a forest of trees made of clouds. The trees these birds inhabit, are they cardinals or woodpeckers whose red beaks have assumed the shape of their whole bodies, don't just reflect the clouds in their slick trunks. Cloud-draped, they wear them and deeply shade first flowers colored black. A small pool of red could be a poisonous tarn or a rabbit hole to seasons' futures past. A painting called Early Spring reads more like a cathedral of snow, foregrounded by a riot of sunflowers or daisies. It hangs above our calendar for April. This is a late career painting for Birchfield. It was painted in 1966. Here, too, there are sky clouds and ground clouds. Those in the sky are underlined in yellow. Those in the ground are overlined in black. If this is snow, it is not melting, but ascending, just as pines spire upward, suffusive in their aiming high. In Gothic window trees for 1918, Birchfield chose trees as frames for clouds, as mediums for diffusing and channeling, not merely blocking light. My favorite of the bunch is Afterglow. Its date of composition, 1916, making me wonder how the war figured for Birchfield, making me reconsider the painting's glow as the aftermath of a violent burst. Parts of sky have been cut out other parts erased. Vast orange clouds are behemoth winged beaches to islands in a distant sea. Purplish gray, tubular, mauveite arms and legs of sky reach in alarmingly, while a crescent moon sun, outlined in brown, resides, we don't know where. Beneath this mostly sky scene, a house settles with a keen of vacancy. It's not just that something's happening out of doors that we're not present to, a seismic mutability we once again have missed. There are no people in these scenes, only human consciousness as vacant dwelling. Birchfield may be best known as a painter who gave form to Earth's vibrations. His vibrating patterns are his signature trait, and they can make you feel your own quivering when you encounter them. Where clouds are concerned, he dares to outline them without holding them in place. He doesn't lasso clouds, but expands his canvas into them. He demonstrates how, by treating an outline as a broad band, a spectrum, really, an amorphous entity can become visible to us, enlightened rather than contained. By intuiting rather than applying cloud outlines, he illuminates inversions from both sides now of clouds never static but spreading like pigment to paper that spills only so far as its saturated edge. So my pursuit of mood cannot have as its aim to capture, to make mood wriggle and writhe. If we're to write clouds, we must hope to liberate them in the same measure that they liberate us. In search of mood hints, I must let clouds act upon me, open and oblique. I must start with tools, like cotton balls and construction paper, gray, then black, now red. Thank you so much. That's a great question. You know, avoidance is an interesting choice. Usually, as I said in the earlier class, I try to immerse myself in the writing of others and in music. And there's nothing like having a companionate voice to help us along. I think it was Gayatri Spivak, the great philosopher of language, who said that we're always writing to the dead and in conversation with them. So we definitely need other voices nearby. Sometimes, though, it is the case that one has to stop if one is to begin. And this happened to me recently, where one of the reasons this book took so long to pursue, not least because I was interrupted in a highly interesting way by cancer, which I then really was called to write about. But another thing that took me off course was that mood is an endlessly boundless, that's rather reiterative, subject. And whereas with Awkward, for example, which you've been reading Awkward: A Detour, you know, no one had really written about awkwardness, and it was my playing field. Mood has been written about by so many different people in so many different fields, in philosophy and psychology, musicology, you name it. And so I really, and also what could be one's mood objects? Where does one decide to draw the line? And so I did at a certain point decide, you know, I have to stop reading. This really has to stop. And if I'm to offer my small contribution, I have to let go. So I think it's a balance, as with any research really that one is doing. And of course, some of you, maybe you don't have this experience because you are younger and haven't had the experience of not working with the internet. I hate to call it the internet. It makes it sound like it is a thing, which it is not. But the new information technologies and digitalities that are available to us make our research both easier and harder, I think. Harder in the sense that, of course, one can perpetually find an envelope inside the envelope inside the envelope of discovery there. At the same time, don't get me wrong, we all know, right, that the internet and the stuff we think that we can access on the web really isn't at all an answer. And everything is not in that box, as we know. It only pretends to have everything. The search engines don't even yield everything. They only yield very certain carefully delineated things to us. But it gets harder, is what I mean to say. Time really is an issue now, I think, where research is concerned, and the presence of the internet. Knowing when to stop and to pull back. And of course, that gets back to the question of how you cultivate a space of contemplative thought for yourself. How do you find the silence that is requisite to real thinking? And that does require closing the other books and turning off the machine. Hope that answers you. Yes?
So, Montaigne blamed inattentiveness for his readers' inability to follow his subjects.
Uh-huh.
And I think he got away with that because it was the 16th century. I wonder how you balance your desire to wander freely with your concern for losing your reader.
I don't think it's a terrible thing to lose a reader. I hope that I create spaces that you can get lost in and even feel lulled to sleep by. It's hard to sleep in an age like the one we're in today. So I'm not trying to hold my reader's attention. I'm trying to create a place that the reader can enter in order to reinvent their own relationship to attention. I love the work of Proust because Proust doesn't require that you pay attention to every word. It's lots of volumes there. It's about acquiring, by way of Proust, if you're reading Proust, an even hovering attention. You can drift off and come back and drift off and come back, but what's making that possible is the way in which his language is holding you. Does this make sense? And so we're all always creating sorts of nets. When I wrote Awkwardness, I mean, it's not something writers usually say. I don't care if you read the book from start to finish. Really? I don't want you hold on to every precious word I wrote and read it all? I didn't compose it that way. I composed it with an aim for people to be able to open it, Awkward in particular, not other books, but that book was written so that it could be read in at least two ways and yield, I hope, different kinds of pleasure. You might either open because you see it has a tabulated index on the side, and maybe you want to read the part on being asked backwards. Or you want to read the section on precociousness. So do that, dip. It's set up that way. At the same time that hopefully it yields a different kind of experience for someone who does want to read it from start to finish. I orchestrated it like a series of concentric circles. So there were themes that recur, but they recur each time with more volume or volubility. And so for the reader who reads it that way, they will have that experience. And for the reader who wants to dip, they will have a different, hopefully instructive and pleasure-yielding experience. But holding attention is not my interest or aim. I do think that a lot of garbage holds our attention. And that it is tyrannical in that way. And to the point that we become stuporous and stupid. And so we might say that, indeed, maybe this is an argument for producing things that don't do that, you know? Because I, like you, when I get up in the morning, it's so sad. I do look. My head goes down. It doesn't go up. It goes down. It goes down to these devices, even though I said, I'm going to be different. Okay, so we're all interpolated. Am I technophobic? Is it a bad thing? No. It's the condition of our current moment. And as artists, you have a responsibility both to work with it and against it, through it and athwart it.
So when I was listening to you read, if I hadn't known ahead of time that you are an essayist,
Mm-hmm.
I would have thought that you were a poet.
Thank you.
Does that do the form lines bother you? Do you sometimes play with poetry, or does it
Yeah.
matter to you where you fit in?
Thank you. That's such a great question and insight. You're my friend. I was trained as a poet at SUNY Buffalo, and I was also trained as a literary theorist and literary historian. And I was hopeful in the 90s when I was really pursuing scholarship to get tenure at the university, scholarship only and poetry on the side. I had a moment where I realized I did not want to sequester these discourses anymore, and that I felt all about the decolonization of the imagination. Why should poetry happen as what you eat after dinner, with scholarship as the main course, or scholarship as the hors d'oeuvre, and poetry as the main course? And it seemed to me that a writing was called for that would bring these things into the same place. Now, the other reason I wanted to pursue this was that I noticed that where scholarship was concerned, the questions that people were asking in my field, which at the time was 19th century American literary studies, they were changing radically. But we would all go to these conferences, and the forms that the scholarship took still sounded the same. Everyone wrote their essays in the same way. And I wondered why people didn't throw tomatoes more at conferences, and why did we sit there and let ourselves, I mean, they all sounded the same. Now, why was it that the form wasn't changing even though the ideas were? Because in art, that is what happens. When new questions are asked, new forms are called for. And so I thought, for these two reasons, I want to try to bring my work and practice and sensibility as a poet into the same space with the kind of learning I was very grateful for as a scholar, a literary scholar. And I think that the essay is open certainly to that. I mean, do we draw a line? How do we not draw a line? I love that essays often are aphoristic, and that the aphorism seems to be neither of the world of poetry or the world of prose. It's its own animal. It's not a line, nor is it quite a sentence, the aphorism. Such a curious species. And the essay so often calls upon it in its discourse. But yes, I am trained as a poet, and someone described my work as poetry in essay drag. Language is of the essence to me, but I think it needs to be for all writers of essays. I talk to my students about word auras, by which I don't mean anything new age, but to think of language as something that has a texture and physicality. At the same time, every word we speak has a history that comes before us and a future toward which it's pointing, and in a whole matrix of usage worked within it. Now, can we as writers be responsible to our words in all of those ways, to think of each word as a kind of geodesic dome? That might be something that is lent me by my sense of myself as a poet. But I think it certainly serves any essayist to think of language in this way. But I'll keep thinking more about that relationship. Thank you. What do you write? Are you a poet by any chance?
I'm just getting started, so I'm trying to think. The lines are hard to, so
Great, yeah,
I like the practice.
yes. Yeah. We'll go. They say there are refreshments to be had. Thank you so much for being here.